Okay, dear speakers and participants, on behalf of Mr. Karim Al-Ainawi, the President of Police Center of the New South, I wish you a very warm welcome, and I would like to thank you for being with us. As you know, the COVID-19 health crisis has called for immediate change in the way we organize our conferences. Since then, the Policy Center of the New South has decided to replace the 4th edition of APSACO with this intermediate or special digital session in webinar format. There was certainly no way for us to interrupt the momentum which started in 2017. First, because the three previous sessions contributed to the creation of an important research community that needed to be consolidated, diversified, and preserved through our annual debate on Africa security priorities. I recall that the first edition focused on the strategic autonomy of the African Union, the second on peacekeeping operations, and the third on Africa's place and influence in the changing world. This year, the current context dictates the topic we will address, which arise in Africa debate as much as everywhere else, I mean the COVID-19 pandemic. The decision to hold this special session takes into account the desire of Policy Center of the New South to facilitate experience sharing between African and experts of African issues regarding the management of the health crisis, but also its geopolitical implications and the challenges it poses in terms of security public policies. We have engaged in this sense, the Policy Center, have been engaged in this sense since March by organizing national and continental events and by publishing more than 2,000 publications related to COVID. This rich and diverse exercise has allowed us, with regards to Morocco and Africa, to identify the achievement to consolidate, the mistakes to avoid, and the paths to adjust. Moreover, this special session also finds its essence from our conviction that COVID-19 can act as a trigger for a lasting transformation of the African security normative context towards more human security, while taking into account local, national, regional, continental specificities. Today, our duty, given the context, is to bring out of the international plans for the fight against COVID-19 from their institutional and symbolic comfort and confront them with African realities. The exercise is challenging because it will mean returning to structural and abstract issues that of the existing differential between the material reality of our continent and its ability to restate its priorities, its agenda, and its security paradigms. Dear colleagues, our conference is intended as a space for dialogue. We want the debate to be organized around three objectives. First, the treatment of the fundamental issues related to the implementation of safety and security measures dictated by the COVID-19. Analysis for the interplay of infra actors during the health crisis, the formulation of pragmatic and operational recommendations. To conclude, the angle of the analysis of this conference was broadened thanks to two workshops which bring an innovative and forward-looking perspective on the contribution of the human security to the sustainability of security in Africa. Allow me to reiterate my sincere hope that this conference will be a success and with your cooperation will effectively contribute to the ongoing debates in Africa. With this in mind, I wish you good day, and thank you again for your presence. And now I think we have to move to the panels. And for the first panel is the security sector in Africa during and after COVID-19 health crisis. This panel is chaired by Mr. Badreddine Harti, Principal Advisor, UNDP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rachid. Thank you for the opening remarks, and thank you, special thanks to the Policy Center for the New South for the opportunity to carry on, and congratulations for the focus despite the health crisis. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear participants, dear friends. I'm Badreddine Harti. A special hello from the heart of West Africa, where I work for the United Nations in Burkina Faso on the Rule of Law and Security Institute. And I would like to thank also the panelists. I'm honored to moderate this session on the security sector in Africa during the health crisis and maybe post-health crisis with some perspective. You would see that the region has been challenged already with many different crises. The countries of the Sahel, for example, alone, there's a humanitarian crisis, there's an intense security crisis, there's a poverty ecosystem and so on. And so the health crisis has really hit where there are multiple layers of crisis with impacts on each one of these layers. You would imagine that the development work that is carried is challenged by the health crisis. The humanitarian one is also challenged. I know many UN, agencies that have suffered a lot of constraints in carry on their, humanitarian activity, whether it's UNICEF or World Food Program and so on, because of the health crisis. So I would imagine that getting a focus and zooming on the impact of the health crisis and how the state in Africa in general, or specifically, have raised to the challenge and how they have made work the resilience to counter all the crisis they come with, the innovative approaches they have come up with, and the way ahead, forward looking, what's coming, although there's a lot of uncertainty. So we hope that we will be able also to bring some of these assessments to light, some of these innovative actions, and also to bring some of these, hopefully recommendations for the way ahead.
Moderator, thank you so much indeed. Dr. Rachid put the entire perspective of our discussion in a very clear perspective. So it just, I think, made things clearer for us to delve into the subject matter that's going much into the background. So I will do first two things. One is I will not focus on the entire security sector. I will not touch upon high security such as military or police or intelligence. Two, I will focus only on the human security aspect. So by just making myself very clear on that, I'll then do three things. The first one, what am I talking about? When I say human security, what am I making reference to? Number two, how has COVID affected the human security in African context? And number three, what really are we doing as a community, as well as a state, so as to deal with this difficult situation, particularly regarding dealing with this COVID-19 as sort of resilience development against this post-COVID-19. So, and whenever we talk about security, we're talking about three things. One, the source of threat. In this case, the source of threat is COVID-19. Two, a referent object. Who is being threatened? All human beings, particularly in African context, Africans. Number three, what are the way out? social capacity, state capacity to be built. So when I talk about these things, when I talk about human security, I'm just talking about how to make at least human life living, how to physically survive during COVID-19, how to keep people alive, to be honest. Africa is not famous for plenty, prosperity, but rather poverty, lack thereof, and of course violence. So as to change this image, people have been struggling time and again, but COVID-19 posed, almost made double jeopardy on Africa. So how has it affected? Quickly, it restricted African communal life, because in Africa, life is communal. I am because you are. I see my being through your being. We are together, then that Ubuntu philosophy makes humanity in Africa a possibility. Two, it affected that very staggering as small industrial services, hotel services, farming, because most African, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, population is youth, young, and it made the young even unemployed because people cannot deliver services by making them unemployed, jobless. And it made health system more fragile, to be honest. And school closure affected the young generation, positive future completely dark. And another one, because governments have been thinking about holding conflict elections in Ethiopia, for instance, election has been postponed, but that election postponement caused some chaos in some part of Ethiopia. Some regional states held their own election, and then that is also creating central government and regional government sort of conflict, which is looming larger. And so these are the problems posed by COVID-19. Then what ways are there out? What should be done? Number one, community-based activities started. In Amharic, it is called Mad Magarat, or sharing food, because a lot of people really live hand-to-mouth life. Therefore, each person is his brother's keeper, his sister's keeper. So as to build resilience, then if they are to buy 100 kilograms of wheat for months, then they have to share 25 kilograms of that to their neighbors. That is what's called Mad Magarat, or food sharing, or dish sharing, as resilience building activity, if you like. Sharing food, and then of course sharing other utensils. Even sometimes if you are to buy some macaroni or some pasta or oil, then you have to share with your neighbors, because you can't be in peace, you can't be oversatisfied while your neighbor's house is in fire, while they're fighting so as to survive. So that is not really the draconian rule by the government, but it is appealing to the human, religious, moral principle of people. So it is based on goodwill, and the government appeals to them, and people responded very positively, each one taking care of her neighborhood. So that's one way of resilience building. The second one, the government did not lock down following what has been happening in the Western Africa or Western Europe or somewhere else, but it rather maintained the school, no, not the school, but this working business, coming and out, because you can't manage, you can't survive by locking down, because the life is from hand to mouth. So the best for you is let them go on daily basis, come back, but keep distance, wear mask, and here we call it physical distance, no social distance. Thirdly, community mobilization, media, teachers, professors, and medical personalities all engage in awareness raising how dangerous coronavirus is. The first one, empowering particularly colleges and universities so as to produce locally produced masks And of course, even those means such as medicines to be produced locally as well. And these are of course not accepted by WHO, but they really have been helping people how to deal with the disease and how to take care of themselves so that they could possibly survive. So for me, then for us here in Ethiopia and in the Horn of Africa, human security gradually, with community collaborating with each other, state capacity being built, society, of course, being more and more resilient, then people really are surviving. And the cases, now we have about 1.5 million tests and nearly about 70,000 cases, and about 1,200 as of today, of course, passed away, and have nearly 30 to 40,000 definitely recuperated or just came back from the quarantine. So overall, you can see this COVID-19 and security situation here in Ethiopia and in Kenya, of course, my brother, and of course in the Horn of Africa, people really are trying to develop their way of, their means of developing their own way of doing and of course managing those conflicts. I think I should stop there, and we may have questions time later on. So thank you so very much indeed. Yes, I'm done, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Yonas, for this very interesting perspective. I fully agree on the human security as a people-centered approach. It all comes back to human security beyond the impacts of, the security sector. The security is, by the way, a matter of all individuals and the population as a whole in a collective effort. Really appreciate the impact that you have raised on communal way of life, which is very African specific, on the small businesses, on the services, on the politics. Well, the elections are hitting everywhere. Also really appreciate the Magaras concept, which really ties the social, the economic, and which basically comes to the resilient impact that has enabled, a community like that of Ethiopia to mitigate the multiple COVID. With this, thank you, Dr. Yonas. We'll give the floor to Dr. Giovanni. Dr. Giovanni is in charge of research in sub-Saharan African within the European Institute of Security Studies. And he also has a thorough knowledge of the very critical nexus between the peace and security pillars, development and the humanitarian. With this and with further ado, Dr. Giovanni, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. I hope you can hear me okay. And very much my presentation will be in line with what Dr. Yonas said beforehand. I want to stress one key point, and I come back to that during the conclusion. The security sector after COVID in Africa shall be by the people, for the people, and with the people. And during my presentation, hopefully, I will explain what that means, but very much agree with the words of the speaker who came before me. And I'm not African, so obviously I will provide with an sort of an outsider perspective over the subject matter, and hopefully this will help also spark the discussion. Now, one point, first point of human security, it has been mentioned before. The current pandemic marks a turning point for international security, and not just African ones. It shows without any margin for doubt or any controversy that the concept of human security has become central and has surpassed in terms of policy action and priorities the traditional notions of military security or national security. A health crisis is the quintessential security threat for the human race. So that's a very basic point to start the discussion about security sector in Africa. Now, COVID-19 poses a number of challenges that go beyond the pressure on the health sector. And as a security threat, it affects Africa by initiating a vicious circle. And I'll explain that in 4 points. So point number one, first, the pandemic has been accompanied by a rise of political and extremist violence around the world And this has also been the case in Africa, as events in the Sahel, in the Lake Chad Basin, and Mozambique demonstrate. Despite United Nations calling for global ceasefire, various conflict actors capitalize on the consequences of the crisis for their own strategies and for their own objectives. So that's one point. Second point, economic fallout and recession will put stress on states, and particularly weak states and conflict-affected ones, with the result of increasing poverty, inequality, reducing service delivery, and having lower budgets for security actors. Now, this can be accompanied by travel freezes and budget cuts. Now, you know that money are the sinews of war, and so the economic impact of COVID will the security sector and expenditures across Africa, and also potentially the capacity of international actors to provide assistance. Third point, humanitarian implication of COVID-19 in Africa have direct impact on the security sector. And here we can mention a number of situations that are already or can exacerbate in the future. Food shortages, inflation, and displacements, which are somehow directly or indirectly linked to COVID, can exacerbate social tensions and instability, overlapping with pre-existing drivers of fragility and putting the situation really under unprecedented pressure, both in urban agglomerates, but also on the peripheries of countries and in border areas. So crime and violence can grow exponentially as a result of that. And fourth point, social unrest in response to lockdowns also exert pressures on national and local authorities. This is probably the most short-term implication. This, in the medium term, can prompt regimes to tighten repression and become less, perhaps, democratic than before, especially if the use of police, military, and secret service force in a different way is used of to contain social movements. And here we have examples of military patrols in Bamako, Abidjan, or Ouagadougou that can undermine trust between the people and the elites. And Human Rights Watch also reported internet connection to be controlled or restricted, in several West African countries to contain the dissemination of fake news. Now, this, of course, can undermine trust, which is the very essence of the provision of security in a society. Now, this is a very bleak scenario, of course. I gave you the bleak points. And to conclude, COVID-19 is likely to act in the most negative scenarios as a catalyst and a booster of pre-existing drivers of fragilities and conflict. The security sector, no less than the health sector, will be exposed to pressure with shrinking budgets and lower level of trust with the population. And the security sector in distress will hamper prospects for economic growth. Now, the question is how to fix it. And here again, what Yonas said is very true. I really second his sentiment and his points. And I will add that youth is the answer and the best insurance for a secure Africa. With 70% of the population under 30, Africa's youth bulge can be a buffer against more devastating effects of COVID-19, including those that are relevant to the security sector. An example of how to make the wisest investments include education, jobs, public services, especially in cities where most of these young urban population live, can be wise investments in order to have a positive implication for security, and also invest in economic integration, trade and economic integration. So the role of the continental free trade area in facilitating these opportunities for growth can be very important. And as I said at the beginning, so security, not just by the security actors taken as a third party alone, but really understanding security at the communal and local level by the people, for the people, and with the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Giovanni, for this very rich perspective. We'll agree. I mean, you have re-emphasized the human security at the heart of it, along the lines of Dr. Yonas. The impact, very interesting also to that you have walked us through, whether it's the exacerbation of political, tensions, of extremist violence and so on. And despite the call for the ceasefire, which was initially endorsed, but the case is still to be evaluated how much impact it has had. On the economics too, increase in poverty, inequality, it has probably reversed decades of work on the development side. On the impact on security and the example you gave on the G5, questions the sustainability, of the cost benefit, the cost effect, the cost efforts also of the international partners, which are also now impacted by COVID. The human points, such as the IDPs. I mean, Burkina Faso has crossed 1 million IDPs within the 3 or 4 crises at the same time, including the health. So that's a point definitely that will exacerbate all the fragility drivers. And I can see the analysis, bring me to probably to your previous work with the World Bank on all the fragility drivers and so on. Most importantly, the point made about security sector actors and the rule of law and human rights. I mean, although I would say that Africa remains a bit, we have seen across the world severe cases where the rule of law has been challenged in quite developed countries. I would hope that Africa would stand high on this one at least. I was a bit alarmed by the worst case scenario, but you pointed yourself that it was a worst case scenario. Well, you'll see more of this, more of the security challenges with more impact. And I would hope that the resilience that Dr. Yonas described before will mitigate some of, and hopefully in every challenge there's an opportunity, and we'll see Africa on this one maybe raising better. With this, we'll take, I can see the questions already come in, but we'll leave the questions to the end. We'll give probably Dr. Said the floor, and then we'll carry on. Dr. Said is the Executive Director of Think in Africa in the Comoros. One of the best mediators we have, at least the youngest in Africa. Dr. Said is a renowned academician on security sector governance, rule of law, mediation. He's an associate professor in negotiation. I have had the chance to listen to his conferences in Dakar and Bamako. With this, Dr. Said, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this very interesting panel on security sector on the pandemic of COVID-19. What I would like to share with you is to reverse the perspective by trying to from the field with the 2 examples. One is the Central African Republic, and other one is the Democratic Republic of Congo. Those 2 states are considered by, let's say, Zartman and the scholars as weak or failed states. And this is very important because if we say we are analyzing the security sector in weak state or failed states, then it's linked to the donors communities. And then it's question the origin of the policy and the money and how everything is framed and then implement and then succeed or not. But before that, I think we need to remember that Great Lake region in Central Africa are parts of trouble, part of the continent where you have Angola with a huge security sector reform program, where you have Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, and the DRC. And what we see there is the process of security sector reform looks like an endless process. And because it's an endless process, then the COVID-19 will exacerbate the lack of money or the fatigue effect for the donors, because we have a lot of program in the beginning of 2000 until now. We're still in the same process of try to find a solution by reform the security sector, not only the gendarmerie, army or police, but the whole judiciary system and the public administration. So I would like to share 3 points. The first point is the fact that donor used to drive those policy, and because of COVID-19, donor needed to. Sorry, my camera is. I don't know why it's always turned off. Anyway, so I was saying the donor driven program will change because nowadays donors has their own priority, and donor money were driven to the COVID-19. So that means the government in Central African Republic, in the RoLSI and other African countries need to fund themselves the money to lead their own program on security sector reform. We cannot no longer base our policy from the donor, because most of donor funds are shrunken by the need to focus on healthcare, on found a solution for this global pandemic. So that means African country, Central African Republic, which need to go on election very soon, and the RoLSI with a lot of program and lots of issue on the table, need to fund their own money to make sure they can drive the security sector, as it was said here, human security and the pandemic itself. So how those weak or failed states can fund the money or make a priority to put some money on security. As it was said here, without security, nothing can be achieved. We know what's going on right now in Central African Republic. Despite several peace agreements, we have still many people outside of the peace process, and we need to bring those people in the peace process. Without result, that will jeopardize the whole stability of Central African Republic. Same in the RoLSI. In Eastern Congo, every day you have people killed in Maniema, in North Katanga, Central Congo, Eastern Congo. So the state itself needed to find a way to mobilize its own money, because the donor has now other obligation. So the second point is this idea of an endless process. If we count the number of security sector program, whether in Congo or in Central Africa, within the last 10 years, we may have more than 10 programs for the two countries. And those programs could not bring an end of the insecurity, given the fact that in Congo, every time you manage to bring, let's say, rebellion group in the peace process, you have a new one, given the fact that the weakness of the state is itself, it's enabled to impose the security for everybody in the countries. So how those weak states can work on peace, genuine peace process and genuine security sector reform. Again, myself, my background is mediation. So I think there is a need to open the door for continual conversation on peace, making sure that we involve everybody, whether the rebellion from the north in Central African Republic, or from the Mai, or the Mai itself, it's split every day. So the Congolese government needed to open the door for continued dialogue, making sure that we bring those people on the conversation, because donor or international community can no longer continue to fund those programs. The last point is this idea of donor fatigue. If we cannot fix the issue, the donor can, they will put all the money available right now on the global pandemic. So I think EU should play a special role on try to make sure that people who have a safe haven, whether in Uganda, whether in Sudan, or in other countries, cannot find this safe haven, and then they have to go back home. And by doing this, we impose the national dialogue, which is necessary to make sure that the idea of security sector reform can fit the need for this very complicated time where nobody can no longer find the money as it used to be done in Congo or in Central African Republic. So with this, my conclusion is to say the global pandemic provide a window opportunity for African countries to take part of their own responsibility and make sure they can find another way to do without the donor money, but maybe by opening local dialogue, making sure we are more inclusive and we are more comprehensive. That will help to make sure what we do is more sustainable than the time where we have lots of money and we start lots of programs, but we could not achieve peace, whether it's in DRC or it's in Central African Republic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Said, for this very the most affected communities, and you have environment, African Republic. What you have also from donors is, the fatigue effect. Also that they have their own trainings, which might divert a bit their attention from this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It has broken for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So you have, Dr. Said, you have also pointed out to the fact that, there has been an increase in violence during the health crisis in those most affected communities. With this, the recommendations that you have given are very, very valid. I can see the mediator's touch in it, the fact that local dialogue has to be built as a resilient factor to strengthen the social cohesion, and maybe instead give some space and time till the donors' efforts are back on track to help. Again, an opportunity for African settings and African countries under those chance to raise to the opportunity. With this, I would like to invite Dr. Khalid Shegrawi to take the floor, Dr. Khalid is now a renowned professor of the Dr. Khalid.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you to invite me to be with you in this panel. Well, my proposal that I want to talk about some general issue about the question and issue about COVID-19 as a single virus. But when we see African country, we are in front of several state profiles. In that way, I have some remarks to do. First of all, I think that there is a lot of difficulties for countries to managing and fighting against the pandemic, the COVID-19 crisis. And with this crisis, we can see some rising new problem linking to the internal and external security of states, mainly in Africa, where the states are not always prepared for this kind of challenges. Let me also say something about some confusion, principally in Francophone area and in some way in North Africa, between some kind of concept of security. I think that in some country, there is a lot of confusion between national security, internal security, human security, and safety security. In that way, they are using their forces and structure in all way, and it provoke and cause some damage and some misunderstanding between society and the state. And all of that coincide of the weakness of the state in general in Africa, from the north to the south, as well as the weakness of the structure and the absence of effective policies, strategies to counter negative impact of instability, and also the negative impact of the COVID-19 crisis. In this sense, there are conventional problems in addition to the impact of COVID-19, which make the task of security more difficult than it is. First of all, some remarks should be noted. In my opinion, the issue of COVID-19 in Africa is not homogeneous. There are significant differences between countries and region. The level of case declared as positive, sick, and victim, level of illness, and other things. Second, the risk profile of each country with the very different vulnerabilities, as well as a very different strengths, also linked to a combination of factors: population size, size of urban environment, degree of conflict and displacement, demographic, and governance. In that way, we can see that the trajectory of evolution of the virus is specific to each country. We can remark also that there is some similarities between countries in North Africa and South Africa Republic. I think it's a very interesting question to make research about that, why we can we find this similarity between the north and the south of this continent, and a lot of difference between the central continent, between the central and the north. A certain mutism, and we can remark that there is a certain mutism, intended or not, concerning the statistical reality of positive case of COVID-19. Many countries no longer communicate on the data. And we can remark that, for example, in North Africa between countries. Five, the health system and strategies are also very heterogeneous between countries with a relatively efficient system compared to the average of the continent, and some countries in a situation of indigence. 6, the profiles of the illness are also different. The different statistics, principally between the north, south in one side and the rest of the continent in other side. The issue cannot be debated given the absence of research in this field. The type of virus infection, for example, the possibilities of mutation, the difference in group and personal immunity, and other connection. There is a big debate now in Europe, principally in France, but I can see that there is no debate about this issue in Africa until now. And I can say that there is no debate from the beginning till now about this issue of of this virus and dissemination in Africa. The protocol, there is very little difference. I can see, I guess that that is true, with an almost unanimous flow of the WHO protocol with a certain independence after the report of the issue of chloroquine. Many countries, if not all countries in African continents, continue to promulgate this prescription of this molecule, which is very well known and tested by African professional and population. I think it's not, we are not in the same debates that created in North, principally in French and in some country in Europe. The greatest leak concerning hospital structure and resources, as well as the strategies of structure of the health department. Some African countries have flow with certain idea of practice linked the traditional conceptions such as example of Madagascar, for example, in the beginning of the pandemic, which is in reality a mixture of a cultural practice, but also political opportunism. And it creates a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of trouble also, because some country, I think that they bought a lot of bottle of this kind of molecule, and that doesn't give us a good result. But we can also preserve the use of some traditional practitioners, but in a way of communication, in a way of push people to respect the health recommendation of state. At the end, my endless remark that due to the political situation and the weakness in governance system in the majority of countries in Africa, there is a certain disparity between the population and decision makers, which leads to mistrust in the states discourse on COVID-19. And we can remark that in the North, for example, some people, some group community, they are not true about the state communication about the pandemic. We talk about the complot and other things. Well, what about the pandemic management in public order? Because this is the big question. I think that in addition to the implementation of health strategy, the state had to prepare it and to able to manage 3 areas in the immediate and prospective future. First, communicate on the pandemic at all levels. And we can see that there is a lot of negative result in that way. Second, to control the respect and the follow-up of the actions adopted and imposed, like containment and other strategy. Third, convincing the society of the validity and sincerity of the strategies and measures and the capacity of the state to fight against the COVID-19. This is, I think that this is a very complicated situation also with the state. In that way, in that case, I think, because we have no time, I want to make some recommendation, because for the state it's not easy to conserve security in internal way and external way, where this what has been situation of instability in the majority of African countries, and also to impose to society to respect directive and measure of containment and other strategy. In that way, I can say that we can decide that the COVID-19, it's a real human tragedy. It is also, in my opinion, an opportunity for the state to reconcile society by assuming its regalian functions and protection and assistance rather than second, to associate the agent and structure of social mediation produced by and from, stemming from cultural and historical practice, and give them the possibility to interfere with population by using its social and socio-cultural legitimacy. And I think that those structures have more legitimation than state in some area. Third, push for more societal consciousness of the dangerousness of the COVID-19 outside the framework of the state coercion in order to limit the conspiracy thinking. And we can see that principally in Francophone area because it's linked to the debate in French mediatic area, or a lot of people talk about the conspiracy order and other things, and push people to not respect the measure imposed by the state to fight against the COVID-19, like, for example, the mask and other things. Fourth, an African state cannot think on its own security or its struggle against COVID-19 without being associated with the each regional and continental environments. But this remains the great dilemma of the continent, which still think in terms of the post-colonial nation state and not a new concept of an African state. I don't know, perhaps in what our grandfather of independence dream of it means federal system or confederal system in Africa, and to create a real African unity. 5, at the end, rethinking scientific research in anticipation of future health crises, because we must wait for the next health crisis, which requires more cooperation in terms of mutualization and association of research in continental laboratories, the development of the pharmaceutical industry in the same direction, the development in association of processing industries, rethinking also food security, food safety, rethinking teaching models through new technology. I think this is the opportunity to be all of us in one hand, in one direction, and to work together. Let me just make a small conclusion. Now, all of us in Africa, we are waiting for other countries, for other forces, for other laboratories in the north to produce a vaccine against COVID-19. And we shall pay for it a high price, and we shall respect, before paid for it, some, what does it mean, gentleman agreements with some country. If we are with USA, I think that it will be not easy to buy it from Russia or from China or other things. I think this is a big challenge, and how to federate, because we have a good laboratory in Africa. We know that. All of you, you know that. We have a good experience in any country, and we have a good, but even though it is a small pharmaceutical industry in the north and also in the south, and how to federate all that to make an African strategy against not only COVID-19, but against the future health crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid Shigrawi, for those very interesting points and perspectives. I mean, I wouldn't agree more on the fact that the confusion on, you know, the national security vision and how the missions are expressed and who does what in a certain, you know, security sector is not helping in many African countries. I can tell you all from a personal experience in Burkina Faso that when the key actors sat around the same table, you know, we ended up with the same committee who has done the national security vision, the policy, ending up as the same committee who's leading the efforts on COVID. Meaning, you know, when they have the political space to have a national security vision, it ends up around the human security, and it makes missions clear for everybody. The second point that you have already, you know, really put the point in, we don't have just one Africa. You know, there are many Africas, many different ecosystems in Africa, and somehow, you know, the tendency probably should be to see each ecosystem and how it provides its own challenges and how it mitigates its own challenges and find its own opportunities. I wouldn't agree also more about all the recommendations that you have, you know, somehow, you know, the enhancement of the trust, the enhancement of communication from state actors toward the population to mitigate all the conspiracy theories and so on. You know, I would also a bit probably just nuance the approach on sub-regional and regional versus national. It's definitely the case, for example, that in West Africa, ECOWAS has a leading role in dealing with COVID. I mean, the opening, for example, of the borders and so on was a collective effort led by ECOWAS. I'm not sure that it has been followed in different ecosystems, but that has been the case. So that again, different Africans in the same continent and different way of doing things. With that, thank you so much for this. I think I will open the floor for colleagues to the panelists to address the questions that have been raised. I can see two main questions. One on the increase of the rape crimes and how that can be mitigated in COVID and probably post-COVID. And I can see also that in the absence of, you know, access to data, access to how can governments have prospective studies, look forward to how to counter the pandemic's negative implications on the long run. Maybe we'll reverse now. Begin with Dr. Khalid and then take Dr. Saeed, Dr. Giovanni, and Dr. Yonas to wrap up on these questions. Dr. Khalid, the floor.
I didn't hear well the question.
Yeah, the questions are in the chat room. So, you know, one is about the race crimes and one is about the absence of data access. How governments can probably adopt prospective policies in absence of concrete data. Yeah.
No, I think it's just a small remark. For example, when we talk about countries in North Africa that I know well, we can see that there is a lot of difference, for example, between the beginning 3 months before and now, the situation in North of Africa. We can see that some countries that are stopping giving data and giving number and statistics. And in compare with their situation, their structure, healthy system structure, and also our neighboring, we can understand, and I talked before about the similarity between country in North Africa and the Republic of South Africa. And there is a lot of similarity between country in North Africa themselves, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya. We can understand what's happening in Libya because there is no central state. There is a lot of difficulty to have real data and statistics, but no one can understand the situation of the mutism in Egypt, for example, and in Algeria. I think that those two countries are given a very bad example of combating the COVID-19, because the problem will rise after that inside the population. They will not trust about what the government said about this pandemic. In another way, I think, for example, in Morocco, we have statistics every day, but the numbers are very high. And it creates also, what does it mean? Some terrible understanding. And people said, oh, that's terrific, how we talk about 1,050 each day, sometimes 2,000. I think that there is a big problem on communication on data and how to explain, because data are nothing if we don't not use it in a good way. And we can explain number in such way and such and different explanation. I think that we miss a lot of, what does it mean? Explanation of what is the importance of data for the government and what is the importance of data for the population. And for example, some, I don't know in English what we say, percentage. When we give some percentage, I don't know, percentage in English, or indicator, when we give some indicator, population doesn't understand this indicator of virality, of illness and other things. I think, yeah, I think that this is a real problem. And also we have a colleague in PCNS, Mr. Flo, who creates the COVID-19 index or indicator. But the problem when we compare this indicator between country, it doesn't give us a real and a good and a positive point of view of all country in Africa, because we have the same system of producing data about that. And also there is another issue, big issue, the structure who produce data in Africa and the link between those structure and the decision makers in our country. And I think that this is a real problem, and think tanks and the university can look for creating a new area of collaboration between institutions in Africa to resolve this issue and to give us more opportunity to use data. And also we have another problem, using data in all African countries. Until now, we are using Occidental platform or Asian platform and Asian or Occidental model to understand and to study our statistic production. I think that we need our own model, not only of producing data, but also about using data and explaining data.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid. Applying the lenses specifically to our context is definitely something that can really enlighten the way we deal in Africa with those issues. Dr. Saeed, would you like to step in?
I will be very humble on the idea of criminality. If we have to learn something from the pandemic, is everything we predict about Africa never happened. So how can we make sure that criminality will rise? Maybe not. We were expecting to have 1,000 people dying everywhere on the street and people fleeing the continent to go everywhere. At the end of the day, all of these predictions never happened. So I think we have to be humble on the future. For now, people are saying we may have a huge starvation, but the problem we have is in Kenya and East Africa are more due to the cricket in those small insects destroying the agriculture than the pandemic. So I agree with my friend here who talk about producing data that can be suitable on our realities. But I think for the criminality, I would like to invite people to be humble. We don't know exactly how tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. I tend to agree with you. I mean, I still believe that it will not harm to plan for the worst while hoping for the best. Dr. Giovanni, would you like to add something to this question, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And perhaps very quickly on the data question, the virus caught the world unprepared to deal with it. This applies to any form of treatment. This applies to vaccines. This applies also to data as well. This is to say that whether in Africa, in Europe, or other parts of the world, it will take time to get reliable data and start making sense of how to best use data for the purpose of countering the pandemic's negative implications. Every day, every week, every month, there is improvement in the way data are used and gathered and interpreted, but it will take time before we get to an adequate use of big data we have to be better able to counter the virus. So it's a process in itinerary in a way. And second, on crime, I would like to perhaps tackle this issue a little bit more broadly by saying that COVID doesn't cancel pre-existing trends. It doesn't cancel progress. It doesn't eliminate conflict drivers, and it doesn't eliminate grievances, especially those which lead to crime and violence. It does make policy action to address them more urgent. So it creates an urgent need for policies to mitigate this acceleration of trends that has been induced by COVID. So from building sustainable urbanization processes or accelerate green growth and digitalization, areas which are becoming even more relevant in every corner of the world because of COVID, policy action here and now, it's really important to boost these processes, and this can contribute greatly in the future to mitigate the negative consequences of the pandemic. Now, this affects not just policy action at the national or local level, but also international cooperation. And here as well is where multilateralism and international cooperation can help. I would say, in two ways. First, I mentioned it before, a more united and integrated Africa can be certainly a driver for future resilience, especially under the continental free trade area, but also closer relations with Europe can help. Africa's problem is Europe's problem. Europe's problem is likely to be Africa's problem. The two continents are close. The two continents can benefit from each other. And I think from crime down to other areas, sectoral areas where there are challenges, a more sustainable partnership between the two continents and between the European Union and the African Union really can yield important benefits down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Giovanni, especially for the partnership dimension. We have just a few minutes left. We'll give to Dr. Yonas the final word, then I'll probably just wrap up just after. Dr. Yonas.
Thank you so much indeed. Please allow me to express my impression and fascination by the answer given, particularly by Giovanni, and of course all of them, Giovanni tried to highlight the indivisibility of security. You can't divide, this is Africa's security or that is Europe's security. For security is such a holistic issue. So the instability in Ethiopia could possibly cause a sort of reaction in Washington, D.C., as you say, this butterfly effect, to be honest. And that's absolutely wonderful. That's why humanity should come together. To hit the nail on the head, let's come to that Dr. Khalid's excellent remark earlier. Context is key. We should really see things case by case basis rather than generalizing them at the same time. So there are some generalizable topics such as security as indivisible, but also criminality. In some cases during COVID-19, crimes even increased. Domestic violence in Ethiopia, in Eastern Africa as a whole, because I kept on following BBC data, SP data, and many other areas. Domestic violence really increased 2-3-fold during COVID-19, extremely caused mainly by this what we call psychosocial desperateness, lack of, even because not going out caused sort of psychological feeling, very negative feeling, to be honest. And then you could see this wife beat, even incent. There's so many bad things which I can't even mention here. Simply, if I take even figures, in clan ethnic-based conflict in Ethiopia, before COVID, we had about 1.2 million IDPs. After that, about 1.4 IDPs in Ethiopia, which can really help us to compare as well. So seriously speaking, it's really good to discuss, as my brother Said said, I think it's good to be modest. We may not really conclude that as a result of COVID crisis or this crime increased. No, it should not be. That cannot really, it could be hasty conclusion. We need case by case approach. Otherwise, we may possibly, make sort of sweeping conclusion, which could not really be consistent with our premises. So I think that is quite important. Regarding data, I think Giovanni answered it again. I'm very happy about that. This developing multilateralism, or if possible, even making WHO, making data sharing, particularly for the nation states, to make it very sort of draconian rule that they all should share, like wearing mask, like keeping physical distance. Then if you want to really sustainably deter or protect or get rid of COVID-19, share data, allow access to data. Let the research be there so that we can definitely make knowledge work, and then we can find solution for this human disease altogether. I think I would possibly agree with all of you. Thank you so very much again. I'm done, sir.
Well, I think that Mr. Harti, you are with us?
Thank you.
Well, perhaps that there is a problem in wellness with Mr. Harti. I can say that thank you all of you to participate with us to this first panel in APSACO. Hope that next year we'll see you physically here in Rabat. I give you an appointment for tomorrow. We'll have another panel, I think in morning, in afternoon, yeah?
Afternoon.
Thank you, Iman. She said what time to say. Well, thank you, all of you. It was a pleasure to hear about you and to learn about what you said. Thank you very much and see you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.